All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to today's Thursday Talk. My name is Andrew Willoughby. I work on Connexus at Search for Common Ground, and I'm very excited to be your host today. For those who aren't familiar, Connexus is a crowdsourced platform whose main goal is to increase access to resources and opportunities, foster collaboration between actors, organizations, and sectors, and improve the impact of social impact innovation initiatives in conflict affected areas. If you're not familiar with Connexus, there's a link either in the chat or the show notes if you're listening at home, where you can make an account, connect with others, upload resources, events, jobs, etc. I'm delighted to welcome Haleemah, Matty, and Rachel to today's Thursday Talk, towards Fridays for FoRB, making space for youth leadership on freedom of religion or belief. Just a technical note before we get going. If you have any questions during today's chat, there are three ways really to ask your questions. One is directly in the chat function on your GoToWebinar dashboard. The other is through the question and answer feature. If you see a Q&A, click there and you'll be able to submit a question. And the third, once we get to the question and answer portion of the session, you'll be able to raise your hand and then I'll ask you to unmute to ask your. With that being said, I'll hand it to my colleague Rachel to set the scene for us.
Thank you, Xander. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today in what I hope is going to be a very lively and engaging discussion. My name is Rachel Forster, and I'm a policy associate for Search for Common Ground, where I work on religious engagement issues such as freedom of religion or belief. As many of you will know, freedom of religion or belief, also known as FoRB or religious freedom, depending on your context, is rooted in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It protects our rights as individuals to hold, change, and manifest our beliefs, whether we are religious, atheists, or other. But despite this protection, we are all aware that FoRB violations remain an issue in every context, but particularly in conflict settings, where they become both consequences and drivers of violence and intolerance. We also know that, according to the UN, 40% of people living in conflict settings are youth. Yet so far, a large part of efforts to promote and protect FoRB have focused on religious leaders who tend to be older men. And although there is a growing momentum to include women in FoRB discussions and initiatives, the same momentum is still building for youth. In July this year, the UK hosted the third Ministerial Conference on Freedom of Religion or Belief, an international forum gathering state leaders, religious leaders, civil society organizations, academics, and more to explore the promotion and protection of freedom of religion or belief worldwide. With us today are two young people who attended this ministerial and who will be sharing their reflections to help us begin our discussion on how we can create space for young people's leadership on FoRB from the grassroots to the global level. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Matty Ispanya Yaqo. Matty is the advocacy coordinator for CAPNI in Iraq, where he works to raise awareness of the challenges faced by religious and ethnic minorities in Iraq. Over to you, Matty.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning and good afternoon for everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Matty Ispanya Yaqo, and I'm the advocacy sector coordinator for a local organization called for Humanitarian Aid in Iraq. We're working to advocate for Iraqi minority, right? Promoting Iraqi ethnic and religious diversity. And we always try to be the voice of Iraqi minorities to the international community. Thank you all.
Thank you, Matt. Would you like to speak a little bit more about your experiences on freedom of religion or belief in the ministerial?
Sure, Rachel. Yeah. So the ministerial conference was really a good opportunity for me to be delivering the challenges and the issues that the Iraqi religious minorities are facing in Iraq, especially in the area of freedom of religion or belief. We are in Iraq having many religious minorities in Iraq that they're not recognized by the government. We have many minorities that being under organized ethnic and religious identity demolishing. So the conference for me was a stage or a platform where I met with many decision makers and politicians and people who are stakeholders for the issue of freedom of religion or belief to deliver the message and to give recommendations on what to do regarding the solutions that's recommended to work on to promote the Iraqi minorities' religious rights and make them feel that they belong to the country. Also, it's another opportunity for us to reduce the religious minority migration, which is happening since 2003 and more.
Thank you very much, Matty. And would you also be able to take us through what you see as some of the challenges and opportunities for youth seeking to take up leadership on FoRB issues, whether that's in Iraq specifically or in international spaces like the ministerial?
So the most challenges that the youth face in regarding to promoting FoRB issues that many of the decision makers or decision takers or stakeholders see youth as people who are not eligible to give recommendations or be a voice for promoting FoRB. In regarding the Iraqi context, the FoRB issues, the religious issues, the cases that facing religious people all are being discussed among religious leaders. Now in CAPNI, we're working in including youth and women to be on one table to discuss with the religious leaders on the challenges that they're facing as youth and women and how to address them, and also how to give recommendations and give solutions from the point of view of youth to the clergymen and to the religious leaders and to the government as well.
Thank you very much, Matty. And one more question to you, I guess, since you brought up recommendations and solutions being put forward by youth and women, can you give us an example of what decision makers can do to live up to their commitments to include young people and their views, their ideas into FoRB spaces?
We have many successful stories that we've been through. Many of youth have brought up really engaging solutions or recommendations to the religious leaders to engage youth activities to promote FoRB. One of the recommendations that they were being proposed to religious leaders is to do climate change activity. I mean, working towards reducing climate change to bring youth from Christian group youth, group from Muslim youth, and group from Yazidi youth to work on planting trees in the university campus as one promotion of freedom of religion or belief to make them work together. Two is to fight the climate change that's happening. This is one of the recent solutions that was proposed, and we are now in Iraq. We are working on it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Matty. And I'll now hand over to Haleemah, who wears many hats, but is currently Senior Research Associate and Facilitator with the Dawah Institute of the Islamic Education Trust in Nigeria, as well as a Gender and Peacebuilding Advisor for the Development Initiative of West Africa. Haleemah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you all for joining us today. It's really exciting to be able to talk about the issue of youth engagement in freedom of religion or belief spaces. That's because some of us may be aware, according to the United Nations World Population Prospect, there are about 1.3 billion youth, especially within the 15 to 24 years age bracket in the world today. And nearly 1 billion of those live in developing countries where conflict is more likely to have taken place. And over time, over the last 2 decades, there has been a lot of advocacy on the need for inclusion of youth and engagement of youth in peace building processes. But what we have seen is that most of this inclusion gradually being seen is more in the areas of peace building that has to do with violent extremism, for example, or terrorism. And some of the conflicts that take place are actually related to whether it's political issues or ethnic issues or religious crisis, for example, or issues related to freedom of religion or belief. But unfortunately, despite the United Nations Resolution 2250, which recognizes the positive role that young people can play in international peace and security, we do not yet have a lot of youth engagement, especially on the issue of freedom of religion and belief. And so I believe that it is very important for us all as stakeholders to really pay attention to this area, considering the critical roles that youth are able to play in these areas as well as in other areas of peace building. As we have seen from so many examples in the world, young people are able to play active roles, especially as grassroots level, at local levels, and up to international levels as peace builders, as FoRB advocates, as peace advocates in their communities. Young people are able to build social cohesion and trust across different groups, whether it is ethnic or racial or religious, and they're able to open channels and spaces for youth from diverse backgrounds to work together and build a shared vision of a peaceful world. So important for us to work on more inclusion of youth and women in FoRB issues as well as other peace building activities. Of course, not doing this really make us as a community globally to miss out on the potentials that young people have to advocate for change, to influence their peers, and to be able to build communities that are more inclusive and more accepting of all, irrespective of their diversity. As it has been mentioned before, youth face a lot of challenges when it comes to inclusion in FoRB or religious engagement spaces. There have been significant barriers to inclusion and support and acknowledgement due to different reasons. One of this is this perceived lack of experience and qualifications of youth, and being stereotyped as troublemakers or immature. And because of this, youth are often included, and this prevents us from bringing these unique skills and capacity that youth have towards FoRB engagement. Also, another challenge that youth and youth-led organizations have in this area is limited access to funding due to the complexity of the bureaucratic systems related to funding, the concerns about the ability of young people to manage financial resources, and also, based on my own observation, there are less funding opportunities for FoRB-related courses compared to other youth or youth-led organizations working on other areas of peace building like climate change or conflict prevention or terrorism and those kind of areas. There are more fundings in those areas than you would find in FoRB-related or religious engagement-related kind of initiatives. Another challenge is where FoRB-related peace-building programs are not considered local priorities. And in some cases, depending on context, they may even be seen as too foreign or too Western, and the communities are not very receptive to interventions in this area. And so because of this, it makes it challenging for some youth to engage in this area, and even youth who are interested in working in the peace building area would, because of challenges like this, that working in other areas related to peace building or humanitarian services rather than working on FoRB related issues. But then, in spite of these challenges, well, young people have continued to make efforts towards contributing and making impacts in the FoRB space all the same. And some of the standing examples include different young people like myself involved in the GISRA project and similar projects around the world. And actually, while we are doing what we can do, there is a need to still do more, both from the part of the youth ourselves, but also on the part of religious leaders and local and national authorities, regional and national, international organizations on how to incorporate young people into these FoRB spaces. And one of the ways that can be done is by supporting initiatives to facilitate inter-community and inter-religious dialogues and exchanges, and supporting platforms for youth and creating safe spaces for youth to be able to engage on these issues. Like I said, apart from what the leaders can do, there are also things that we as the youth have to do to increase our own engagement and our peers' engagement in FoRB spaces. And one of this is for us to be the change we want to see. So we have to change our attitudes towards people of different traditions or religions or beliefs. And we have to be the forebearers on the frontiers of mutual respect and peaceful coexistence and non-violence. And we also need to equip ourselves and other youth leaders and youth-led organizations with the necessary values and knowledge and skills to be able to communicate and exchange and engage peacefully and meaningfully across social, cultural, ethnic, religious, racial boundaries. And lastly, I believe there is a need for us to continue to design and implement youth-driven actions and initiatives for FoRB-related peace building, and also to organize events to give visibility to young people participating in FoRB spaces and advocate for a meaningful youth engagement in this area. I believe that if we're able to put all of this in place, we would be in a better position to maximize the opportunities presented by having youth inclusion and engagement in FoRB-related dialogues and religious engagements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Haleemah, and thank you both to you and Matty for an already extremely rich discussion and pointing out some avenues for us to be able to engage, from working on issues like climate to designing and implementing our own youth-driven actions and initiatives. I'm sure that there'll be many more elements that come out of the conversations. So now we're moving to the second part of this discussion, where we'll be opening the floor to any participant who would like to ask a question, whether to Matty and Haleemah or to the group more broadly, or to share their own reflections on these issues. But just before we begin, I would love to draw attention to the fact that this is a space meant to center the voices of young people. So during the discussion, I would ask anyone older than 34 to consider this an opportunity to listen to young people's perspectives. And to anyone younger than 34, please, we would love to hear your voices and perspectives. Thank you both. So to participate, you can either raise your hand and be unmuted, as Xander mentioned, or submit your question in the chat box. And I'll be handing over to Xander for this part of the discussion. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel, Haleemah, and Matty, for such a great conversation so far. And for each of you that have already put a question in the Q&A function, I'll go ahead and ask the first questions as we sort of think of the questions that we have for our speakers, or also ideas that you want to share with the space, especially for youth voices. So for Matty, I'm curious, could you share sort of what are current barriers to youth participation in FoRB work? Sort of what is holding youth back from participating?
Thank you, Zed. What do you mean by youth participation in the FoRB work? Do you mean as a civil society engagement, or governmental engagement, or can you more specify so I can answer you properly?
Yeah, I'd say from a CSO perspective, like what makes it difficult for youth CSO advocates?
So we have two challenges. The first challenge, as Haleemah mentioned, is the lack of funding to prepare and engage in FoRB activities or promotion of FoRB, or working on FoRB cases. The second challenge is the weak network that the youth may have always working to promote FoRB it means working with the legislative and authorities. So when youth don't have good connections to affect those people, when they don't have clear map on the stakeholder that they're working with, their work may go in vain, and they may fail to achieve what they're aiming for, and even sometimes they may make the case worse. For example, if they're working on recognizing specific religious group, if they don't have a map of work, they don't have a clear work plan or stakeholder map analysis, they may make it worse, the situation for the specific group they're working on. So as I mentioned, it's a lack of funding and lack of a good network.
Thank you, Matty. We have a question from Mary. Mary, do you want to unmute and ask your question? Otherwise, I can also read it.
Morning. Nice to see you all on the screen. Thanks so much, Matty and Haleemah. Really interesting to hear your perspectives. My question, there was two-part. One was, who are the champions that youth can look to help make space for youth in these discussions? And then the second part.
Mary, I think we lost you. So I'll ask the second part of the question was, what strategies do you see that youth can implement to build networks with the larger field? Haleemah, do you want to start on that one?
Yes, I can start on the second one. And what I would recommend is first for the youth themselves to set up and support platforms for one another. Like as youth, we have to create safe spaces for ourselves to work together first. And then that way it is easier for us to make meaningful partnerships with other organizations or other leaders and others who would be able to support our work. But then where I come from, it is really said in a proverb that it is the child who raises the arm up that the parents would carry. So we also have to put in some efforts, and then it is easier for us to be able to time quality partnerships with others, because some of the challenges we've seen is that when youth or youth-led organizations try to partner with more established organizations in order to be able to access funding easily or get more capacity building support and other resources, the relationship is not usually egalitarian. It's usually very top down, and that does not help in meaningful inclusion and engagement.
Thanks, Haleemah. Matty, do you have on either the question on potential champions for youth or also for building networks?
Is that to me or Matty?
It's to Matty, but he just said that he's having some internet issues hearing us. So for I'll direct that to you, especially on potential champions.
Yes. In terms of potential champions, I feel that there are some youth already doing something in this regard in terms of working on promoting freedom of religion and belief. And so sometimes it's, like I said earlier, it's about being the change that you want to see. How do you see people of other religion, for example? How do you engage with them? Is it mere tolerance of, okay, there's nothing I can do, so I tolerate you? Or is it more peaceful kind of coexistence and respect and being able to work together for mutually beneficial purposes? And then also connecting with other like-minded youth in order to be able to work on these areas. Also, there is a need for education and capacity building, because whatever you do not have, you may not be able to give, as it's usually said. What you do not have, you cannot give. So we need to also be able to equip ourselves with the necessary skills and knowledge and attitudes that are needed to be able to advance this kind of work. Another thing that I think youth champions should do or can do is to also address the different forms of disadvantage and exclusion that other youth have, because we have to realize that we are not all operating on the same plane. So even though we say that youth are excluded, some youth are already have some level of inclusion, but there are other youth who are even further excluded because of their socio-cultural backgrounds, or because they come from poor or rural or minor communities, or from a minority group, or from marginalized political backgrounds. So what is necessary for us as champions is to be able to reach out to this kind of youth and include them, and then before we try to get included at the higher level.
Thank you, Haleemah, and perfect timing to have Matty's connection back. Matthew, who are potential champions for youth that you see in your context?
Thank you. Sorry for being in and out. I'm sitting in a local cafe and their internet is kind of weak. In my context, I'm talking about the Iraqi context because I'm not really familiar with the international context of people to promote FoRB. We have several clergymen here in Iraq. They are seen as a champion. Also, there is something that we always see as a model in Iraq, where the survivors from ISIS, the women who were captives in ISIS, they were welcomed back by the Yazidi religious committee. They declared that they can be welcomed and baptized again. This is a model for the whole Middle East, not only for the Yazidis, because back in time before ISIS, if a woman in Yazidis will go and marry or escape with another man, she will be banned from the Yazidi community. But this is a special case of kidnap. This is a special case of rape, and we always see that this decision is a heroic decision for all Iraqis and minorities in Iraq and Middle East as well. We always hear people from Morocco, people from Algeria, people from other international communities talking about this lovely model. We also have some Muslim religious men who are seeking for a secular state. They always fight and be in critical discussions with the government and with other religious leaders to protect FoRB and promote it in Iraq, even for believers or for non-believers.
Thank you, Matt. We have a question from Patrice. The question was, why Fridays for FoRB? I believe that one goes to Rachel.
Yes, thank you, Xander. As the person responsible for that title, I think I should claim some ownership. So, Patrice, thank you for your question. The title Fridays for FoRB is a reference to the movement Fridays for Future, which many of you will know already as the climate advocacy movement pioneered by Greta Thunberg, which reached places all over the world and inspired young people, but also older generations to take action and advocate for climate and raise awareness of the nature of the climate emergency, both at the national level in grassroots communities, but also up to the international UN level and other international and regional fora. So as it was largely a movement started by a young person, Greta was a teenager, she was still in high school when she started it, and she was joined by young people from all ages and walks of life. I think it's a very good example of the power of young people to mobilize and create impact. And it was a good framing and maybe a model of inspiration for ourselves as members of interfaith communities or FoRB advocacy work on what can be done when young people are given leadership, or take leadership rather, as they were not given it, they claimed it for themselves. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. And actually, sorry, while I'm here, I will redirect a question to Matty and Haleemah, quite cheekily, but both of them mentioned climate, and this seems quite topical. So I would like to hear from Matty or Haleemah, whichever one of you would like to answer it, or if anyone has any thoughts of their own in the audience that they want to post by comments. If there's anything the FoRB youth movement can learn from other youth movements like the Youth Peace and Security Movement or global coalitions like Friday for Future. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think something that we can learn, especially from the climate change movement, is the power of numbers. And really, this is all about networking and having platforms and really connecting across the globe in order to be able to advocate for an issue. The challenge is that a lot of youth do not really see FoRB as a big issue to, let's say, climate change. But then we have to realize that this is an issue that really leads to a lot of loss of life and a lot of destruction in many places around the world. There are a lot of conflicts around the world that are related to denial of the FoRB of one minority group or the other. In some cases, they aren't full-blown conflict yet, but there is the marginalization of people of a particular minority religious groups, and this happens virtually everywhere in the world. So it is actually an important issue because every human being has the right to their freedom of religion, I believe, and they should not face any persecution or any challenge or violence or aggression because of that. So I believe that it is really, really important for youth who are engaged in this space to learn the importance, and also work towards serious networking and connection and mobilization and working together in order to be able to advance for the importance of paying enough attention to FoRB-related issues.
Thanks, Haleemah. Matty, do you have something to add to that?
Well, I cannot say anything more than Haleemah. She mentioned great thing, but I would also like to add something on the climate of FoRB concerns. We always can promote FoRB, and we can always fight climate change in one fight. So in every disaster, all people will unite to fight this disaster. Climate change now is a disaster, and if we in civil society organizations work on bringing different religious groups, different religious leaders to act and to fight climate change during religious announcement, religious speeches, through that we can one, promote FoRB in our climate change fight activities, and we can also fight the climate change that's happening now in the world.
Thank you, Matty. So, Emily, I'll go to you for a question. Do you want to unmute?
Sure, thanks, Xander. But I was just wondering, as Rachel brought up the point about what can be learned from other movements like climate change and youth peace and security and advocating for those issues, if you, Maddie, and Haleemah have any ideas or visions for how there might be collaboration with the FoRB movement across these issues that definitely seem interconnected, and how advocating for these issues in solidarity might create some new solutions. Just wondering if there are any ideas around that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very good suggestion. I think I would like to hear what Matty thinks around this also, in terms of collaboration with youth who are engaged in other movements like climate change or youth peace and security. I think that would be a very interesting kind of collaboration and would probably lead to better and faster results. What do you think, Martin?
We're having connection issues again. I just sent it by text. We'll give another second as folks are, or as Maddie's connecting. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions if folks want to add those to the chat.
Okay. In the meantime, I think this is actually a very good proposition. I haven't given much thought to it, but just hearing you talk about it now, I believe that it would be a very good opportunity. We can learn from one another. We can tap on the available resources. Also, the reality is that none of these problems that we are trying to solve is in a vacuum. And many of those challenges are actually very interrelated. I'll give an example from the Nigerian context, for example. We have crisis in the Middle Belt in Nigeria that is related to climate change and at the same time related to ethnic diversity and at the same time also related to FoRB or religious engagement. And the crisis has to do with clashes between herders and farmers. And at the same time, the herders are majorly Muslim, while the farmers are Christian. So it has a component of freedom of religion, I believe, or religious diversity issue. At the same time, the herders belong to one ethnic group. They are Hausa Fulanis majorly, while the farmers belong to another ethnic group. At the same time, we also have issues to do with climate change, reduction of available resources, which means that both the herders and the farmers are trying to tap on the same resources, which is not enough or adequate for to go around. So in this kind of scenario, we can see one issue, one conflict, but that is related to different kind of issues. And I believe that if these different movements, people working on youth, working on climate change, youth working on freedom of religion and belief, come together and work together, it will give us faster and better results than having just the climate change movement working in that area or just the FoRB movement working in that area. So I think that this is really full of potential.
Thank you, Haleemah. I want to answer this question by saying that Iraq is now facing a very serious challenge from the neighboring countries of carrying water, building dams and carrying waters on Iraq. So Iraq in general is facing huge climate issues, which is affecting first in the neighbor countries' borders where minorities are living are the most affected ones, where many of them are farmers and relying on agriculture for their living. So this is a really threat to the minorities, religious minorities, to flee, find a better place where they can have a place to plant vegetables and fruits and etc. And also a serious issue for the southern Iraqi area, where many of the non-minority people are relying on the fishing for their income and for their exporting seafood from other countries. This can be collaboration on advocating for FoRB in the manner of reducing migration, and for the climate change in the matter of reopening the dams and let the water.
Thank you, Matty and Haleemah. I'm going to transition to sort of last thoughts in closing, but a few things that I heard each of you say that really stuck out to me was this perceived lack of experience of young advocates and young practitioners. Another thing of FoRB not being seen as a local priority, that sort of getting on the agenda at the first place is an uphill battle before we even get to the next round of discussion. and also the inherent intersectional view that youth have towards each issue area, especially with an impending climate crisis, that sort of with every bit that we think about and we work about as young people working in advocacy, that is intermixed with all of our work. So I want to thank each of you for the time today, for sharing your perspectives, for all of your work and your day-to-day jobs as well. I'll give each of you the last word. Rachel, do you want to kick us off with that?
Actually, if you don't mind, Xander, I think I'll go last and let Haleemah and then Matty.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's been honor having the opportunity to just share a few thoughts. I think that this is something that needs to happen more often. We need to also have platforms for youth to meet and exchange ideas and cross-fertilize ideas and act and network in order for us to be able to advocate for those things that really matter for us and our communities, and also to be able to learn from one another and see what is working in other spaces that we can adapt based on our own context and hopefully be able to make more impact within our respective communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xander, for raising this question. Before I finish, I would like to thank everyone for attending this beautiful session. Thank you, Xander, Rachel, as the organizers. I would like to answer the question by youth shall always learn how to advocate for issues. So we have many good sources, such as learning platforms for advocates on how to advocate for FoRB. They are very useful websites, and they really give good working toolkits on how to start to be an advocate. I've really learned many things from the learning platforms and the online courses, especially when it's engaging courses where you have conferences and webinar meetings to meet and discuss. So as Haleemah mentioned, having a platform of exchange, of learning, and having someone to guide you. This is an important thing, because without someone who knows the context, someone who has good network, so it's always good to have someone to guide you through your advocacy work, because without someone who know how to guide you and someone with good network, your work may not be accomplishing the proposed goals. So my two recommendations are to learn and to have someone to guide you on how to move. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, both of you, for really, really rich discussion. And thank you to all the participants who asked questions and also, as a result, enriched that discussion. It may not be a fully fledged platform of the kind that Matty and Haleemah are envisioning, but I do want to flag to you that on the Connexus platform, we have discussion boards. And one of our discussion boards is currently connected to this event. I've just put the link in the chat, but you'll also receive it by email after the event closes. And if you have a question that you maybe didn't get a chance to get answers to, or you have any reflections, or if you want to start a completely new discussion topic on this platform, then please join us and be part of the conversation and exchange learnings, as we've just been saying, is so essential to all of our works. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel, Haleemah, Matty, for joining us today, and for each of you for attending another Thursday Talk session. To continue the conversation, head over to the discussion forum that we just posted in the chat. You'll also get it by email and be able to see the recording of today's session sometime next week. So make sure you're signed up for Connexus newsletter emails to get that recording. With that, a huge thank you to each of you again, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye all. Thank you.